let's go ahead and start to add more functionality into TweetScan. And what we're going to do now is do what's called a share operation. And let me give you an example of what that would be. Over here, I see Thomas Maurer has this post about how there's new specs being revealed about Windows 8 tablets. And I may want to be able to select that tweet and somehow share it with people I know. And all I did there was a right click with my mouse. That'd be a down swipe with your finger on a touch device. And what I want to be able to do is take this tweet and either retweet it or maybe post it to my Facebook page or send it via email or whatever, right? You kind of get the idea. But I don't want to build all that functionality into my app. My app is about looking at Twitter and looking up hashtags, and that's it. I don't want to have to build in all the stuff to retweet something or post it to Facebook or attach it to an email message. And that's where sharing comes in. And you may have noticed while I was doing some of the other demos that when I bring up the charms bar, there's actually a share charm. And if I click on this, you're going to see right now it's telling me that this app can't share. And what we want to do is obviously build in the functionality to be able to share. So let's go back in and we're going to stop debugging. Now this is a real quick aside if you're following along. By default, when you put a list view onto your page, so I just switched over to Expression Blend real quick. You'll notice over here in the HTML attributes pane that the selection mode I have is single. By default, you get multiple or multi, which means you can select with multiple swipe gestures or multiple right clicks, multiple items out of the list view. Well, that doesn't make a lot of sense in the scenario that we're dealing with, so I'm going to go ahead and set the selection mode to single, just in case you wonder why maybe your app is behaving differently than mine. We'll switch back now into Visual Studio. I'm in home.js, and you can see here's where we wired in the search pane earlier. And what we're going to do is start to enable the ability to share. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go grab something called the Data Transfer Manager. And this is going to look a lot like what we did to get started with search, Windows.application model. But then we're going to go into the Data Transfer namespace. And what we're looking for is the Data Transfer Manager, and we're going to ask for that Data Transfer Manager for the current view. That's very similar to what we did with search. This is kind of like, it's not quite exactly what's going on, but you can imagine that this is wiring into that little share pane. And what we're interested in is that when that share pane opens, Windows 8 is actually going to ask for data from our application. And it's going to say, what data would you like to share with me? So on data requested. And what we're going to do is basically build out the functionality here, or the data that we want to share. Now in our case, we're working with that grid view, so I'm going to go grab grid view 1. I'm going to get it again as a width and control, because this grid view 1 by itself is just the div out of the DOM. We're going to go say, give it to me as the WinJS control. We're going to go grab selection out of there, and what we're going to ask for is the get items. And this will give us all the items that have been selected. Now what's interesting about this is this doesn't return us just like an array of items. It actually gives us a promise. This is an async operation. There could be a lot of items selected. It could take a little bit of time to figure out what those items are. So we're going to actually have to work with a promise. And what we'll do is inside that promise is we'll just handle the success scenario, and we're going to have a function that will take the actual items that have been selected. Now in our case, we know that there is always one. You could certainly have multiple, or maybe you have none selected. So in our case, we need to check to make sure that you have actually selected something. Make sure that you have more than 0 items selected. That means you have something to share. And then what we're going to do is in that arguments, we're actually able to grab the request itself. And in the request, there's a data package. And there's lots of different things that we can set on this data package to be transmitted over to that share pane. 2 things that are very important is, one, to give a title. This will show up in the share pane, and it lets people know what you're sharing. So we're going to say tweet from, and why don't we go ahead and use the item. We know that there's always only going to be one, so we'll just go say use the very first item. And then there's the data payload itself that's actually been bound into the item that's been selected. This is our tweet essentially. And we're going to go grab the from username, and so that way we can show that, hey, there's this tweet from whoever. And what we're then going to do is on the request, we're going to set the other very important property, which is the description. And and I missed up here also, it should be properties.title. There's the IntelliSense working for us. Properties.description. And here what we're going to do is to say we're going to give a description of the operation. Share this tweet. That way people know that, hey, you're going to be sharing this tweet. And then this is where we start to actually define what data we want to share. So we're going to go in and go grab our request. We're going to get the data. And then you can see there's a whole series of set operations. And what I'm doing is I'm setting the data that I want to share. So I could share an image, for example. I could share some HTML. I could share some text. I could share a URI. I can actually provide data that's coming from something off of the file system, a folder for processing. I can do my own custom data formats. There's lots of different things I can do, and you can assign more than one. Now in my case, I'm just going to say I want to set text, but if I wanted to, I could set the HTML value as well. And there's two reasons to do this. One, or two reasons to provide multiple types of data to be shared. The first is that when we pass this data back to the DTM, what's going to happen is that the data transfer manager is going to look at all of the different data payloads that we've set, and that's going to give us the list of applications that can actually accept the share. Not all apps can accept all data types. So if, for example, Internet Explorer can take a URI because it knows how to go off and search for a URI, but maybe another app doesn't. This just gives us lots of options for which applications I can share to by providing more data formats. Also, it allows applications to choose what data format is best for it. So if I'm sharing to an email client, for example, and I give it text and HTML, it may use the HTML to provide a better email message. So just some ideas there on how that works. Now, one last little bit, and this is a little thing to know, a little thing to be aware of, is that inside of the onData requested event here, if you are going to be executing any kind of promises, what you're saying by default is, well, I'm going to do something that's going to go off another thread. It may take a while to get done. And so what we want to do is grab what's called a deferral. And what we do is we go into our arguments here and we take the request and we call a method called getDeferral. And what this does is it's letting the DTM know that, hey, I'm going to be running some async code here inside of my handler, and I'll tell you when I'm done. Okay? In our case, we probably could have actually gotten away with not having to get a deferral and call complete when we're finished, because this is a very, very quick operation. But you may be doing some longer running processing, indexing a file, or something like that. So just as an FYI. All right, so let's go ahead and fire this up now and see what we get. So here we are back in Windows. We'll just go ahead and say, hey, this new Windows gadget tweet looks pretty cool. Let's go ahead and bring up our search pane, or our charms bar, sorry. Bring up the share, and now you can see tweet from Windows gadgets, share this tweet, and you can see I have my mail client. I could go to Metro Twit. It will actually take that. This allows me to do kind of the retweet sort of function. And then another sample app that I've built before also shows up. So let's go ahead and click on the mail client. And you can see that it opens up a piece of UI. So this is the mail client implementing the share target part of the equation, right? The other side of the equation. And tweet from gadgets. And for some reason, I must have messed up that piece. Yes, this should not have been text content. This should have been text. So let's go ahead and try that one more time. Fire it off from local machine. Sorry about that. Right click on the gadgets that I want to share. We'll bring up the share charm. Go ahead and stick it into mail. And there is the tweet that's being shared from my application into the mail client. Now just to show you that if we come back into TweetScan and we unselect an item based on the way our code works, I say share, hey, there's nothing to share right now. Now you can also, if you want, build in a button, and we'll actually look at how to do this in the next screencast when we start talking about app bars, to open that share window explicitly. If I want to have a button or a piece of UI somewhere on the app bar or something else that would not rely on the user swiping, I can do something like this, and I'll just show you the code very quickly. This is not the place you would put it, obviously, but just so you know you can do this. I could come in and say Windows, if I can type, Windows application model, data transfer manager, and I can say show share UI. And that will actually pop open the share UI for me immediately and not rely on the user. And again, we'll see that when we work with the app bar. You can do the same type of thing with the search pane as well. So there you have doing share, or at least part of the share scenario. In later screencasts, we'll get to the second part. And I hope you're enjoying the screencast so far, and we'll see you next time and introduce app bars.